Hi, this is the church planter point for week 8 in our class. We're talking about being an evangelistic church. I have two things that I want to cover just from some practical experience that I have within our church, Northland Village Church, and then also with all the different churches that we've started. I think a two-prong frame is fitting here for what it means to be an evangelistic church. The first prong is around the actual embodiment of the church in its evangelistic activities. So I'm going to contrast that with how do you then also disciple people in your church to be great evangelists in their everyday context. So the first, being an evangelistic church, I think of events that we create, that we all work together to create to promote the shalom of the city, to share in the good news of Jesus with people, however you want to say it. So for us, a couple, I'll talk about 3 that we started. One is the simplicity sale we started. So we wanted to do something that was countercultural to our consumeristic culture, which was fitting for our context. People enjoyed that. So we created the simplicity sale, which is essentially a fancy way of having a flea market. We invite people to get rid of their excess stuff, to bring it together into a single location. We brought it to a public place. We brought it onto this huge porch on the main street in Atwater Village, and we invited people just to sell their stuff. And then all the proceeds of those sales go to the nonprofit of our choice. So that was one we worked together to do. A second one that we created was the Atwater Art Walk. The Art Walk was an effort from a think tank from our church that pursued a grant. We wrote for a grant, we got it, and we created the Art Walk. So the Art Walk gathers art from all sorts of different artists across Los Angeles, and the art is brought into businesses who stay open for a night to show the art, and then the point of the art is for the artists to share their story through their art. So when they put their art in the show, they also have to include a written portion of why that art tells their story. We do this to promote the shalom of the city and to promote diversity and inter-ethnicity, inter-socioeconomic class, all those sorts of things. So people will go view the art and they get to see art from people and get to engage their stories from all sorts of different cultures and backgrounds. And then afterward, people they vote on their favorite piece of art. They include their email, and we follow up saying, hey, thanks for coming. Just so you know, this is an event hosted by a local church that cares about XYZ. Then they get an invite into a relationship with any of our staff, or to any other of our events, or to our worship service. So that's the second one of everyone working together. And then the third one, everyone working together, which I think I've talked about, is the homebrew competition. This is a picture of a bar in our city. This is people, their homebrews coming together. And then what we literally did when we began was a public proclamation, like Book of Acts style, where someone would get up and share about the kingdom of God with the group. So those are 3 examples of the church working together to have an evangelistic effort together. The second prong is equipping, discipling, getting people set up to share their faith in their neighborhoods, in their families, with their friends, in the third spaces that they participate in, and at work. So I've been leaning toward the second prong as actually a more effective way to engage with people with the gospel. A perfect example just happened in our church. So what we did practically is we have a real creative church, and people are starting and creating things all the time. So the most recent thing that this person created was an event called Game Changers. He gathers under-resourced youth from South Central and brings them together to widen their imagination for what could be with their lives. These are the most edgy kids. These are kids that got kicked out of the public high schools, are now in the special school for the kids that got kicked out. So we bring them together This guy brings in all sorts of different people from church and his personal relationship networks to do things like conduct interviews with the kids. Like they would interview for a job and they get feedback on how the interview went, to do a writing session with them, to teach them about creating resumes, to help them create their initial resume, to do all this. And then just people from church are all over interacting with these kids. All that to say, this is an effort that I'm going to be encouraging our church to move toward, gathering around a single person and their effort to share in the gospel with multiple people. And that comes out obviously in lots of different ways. So how do we resource individuals in our church by gathering lots of people and their talents around the thing that they're creating? That, on top of sermons and on top of different studies that we put together to equip people for their context. We've been putting in a lot of work there. It's tricky. People are weary of proselytizing. People are weary, like I've talked about a lot, of our post-colonial context, and we need to be mindful of that. We need to be thoughtful and led by the Spirit, and present this great story that we have through these efforts. So I hope that's helpful. I hope you have a great week, and we'll talk to you next week.